All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name's Hat.
And I'm Eric.
And today we are going to be talking about the billion FF games that were announced. Not really a billion. I think it was like 8 FF games that were announced for Switch and some other consoles. Nothing new, but it is exciting nonetheless.
A billion Switch titles and FF ain't one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have a bunch of trailers that we're going to cover probably pretty quickly. We have a new Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer, Project Prelude Rune, the project that the director of the Tales series has been working on. That has a new trailer. And then also Project Awakening, very interesting JRPG that's coming out. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then finally, we have a Tales of Vesperia date. So we're going to kind of consolidate all that into one topic here. And then also we have some listener questions. So first off, we have what qualifies or defines an RPG? And then we have another question that says, what non-RPG series would you like to see make an RPG spinoff? So without further ado, though, let's start off as usual with what have you been playing, Eric?
Well, you all know what I've been playing. I'm still going through Dragon Quest XI. I've put roughly over 60 hours easily into it. I am at the final dungeon currently, but that's the most I can really say about it without trying to spoil everything. I will say that the journey has still been amazing from start to end, like easily the JRPG of the year for me.
Yeah, I've been playing the same game, so I guess we can kind of talk about it here a little bit. But I know you said you're towards the end. I'm not quite to that point yet, but it's been getting better and better the more I've played it. At first, it was a little jarring for me because I had to get used to the fact that this was like kind of like a Super Nintendo game mixed with a PlayStation 4 game. But I've kind of adjusted to the pacing of it, and it's gotten really, really good. The only thing that's kind of getting a little, and I think I'm going to have this issue with every Dragon Quest game I play, is I'm not a big fan of the main character that doesn't speak. I just feel like the game would be better if if the main character spoke. But I realize that's a tradition of the Dragon Quest game. I realize you're supposed to put your avatar on the main character, and it's supposed to be resembling you. But I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not 15 or 16. I don't have long hair. Like I don't.
Yeah, it shows that self more when the game is more narrative driven than previous Dragon Quest games where you're mostly interacting with townspeople and other characters that are more carrying the scene for you. Dragon Quest XI in particular, a lot of stuff is like a lot of the plot points of the game are heavily involved with the silent protagonist. So I can understand why some people feel that way. I'm used to how Dragon Quest does that, so it's okay with me personally. Yeah. But if people have an issue with that, I can understand that.
Yeah. To me, it's not so much of a fault. I think like, what would this game be like if we actually had a main character that had lines of dialogue and could interact with this engaging story? But nonetheless, it's still really well done. I'm still really enjoying it, and I'm gonna keep playing it. And thus far, it's probably one of my favorite RPGs this year. So it's really, really good. If anyone has not checked it out, y'all should check it out.
Yes, go buy it. It is a must buy for JRPG fans.
Yeah, it's really good. So, but I'm sure we're gonna have more to talk on that later on next episode. But if you don't mind, let's just jump into our first topic here. So recently, Square announced. Oh, with Nintendo, it's really the biggest announcement is that all these FF games were announced for the Switch. I think they're also coming to the Xbox, which is kind of unusual and news of itself. But I don't have an Xbox, or Xbox One, I should say. So whatever to me. But as far as like on the Switch, it's a big deal. We're getting Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 10, Final Fantasy 12. Final Fantasy, Crystal Chronicles. We're getting the Pocket Edition.
Don't forget 10-2.
10-2, which I'd rather play 10-2, I think, than maybe Crystal Chronicles. But anyways, so I think that's all the FF games. I might be missing one. I don't know. It's a lot of them. I'm kind of disappointed we're not getting for the 4, 5, and 6 on there, but I'm sure those will come eventually. But man, the fact that Final Fantasy 7 in particular is coming to this Nintendo console, I think is a big deal, because that was that title alone back in the day, that was like Square's like, no, like I'm not going to be on a Nintendo console. Nintendo already screwed us. Because for those listening, I mean, well, Final Fantasy 7 was supposed to be on the Nintendo 64, and Nintendo was promising all these companies that they're going to have a CD-based console. And when they switched, like, a lot of companies left, and Square was one of them. And Nintendo told Square, don't ever come back. So, I mean, Final Fantasy 7 was part of the reason why the PlayStation did so well. If not all of it, but like it definitely contributed to it. 13 million sales. So, I mean, the fact that Final Fantasy 7 is actually on a Nintendo console, you feel like you want to say something out. But I'm just saying, the fact that it's on a Nintendo console, it's pretty amazing to me. Go ahead.
It's I mean, 20 years late, but it's coming.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, Square did want to continue a relationship with Nintendo because Nintendo was at the time the safe bet. I mean, and they were excited to create the next Final Fantasy and Secret of Mana on top of that for the Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah,
or at least the Nintendo PlayStation for Secret of Mana. And they're like, okay, well, they dropped this, so we got to condense everything to make it a cartridge form. Because like Secret of Mana was supposed to have like time traveling and all that crazy stuff, but because Nintendo had the falling out with Sony, they had to greatly condense it. So when Square was naturally thinking, okay, well, we'll just wait until Nintendo goes to the next system, which has to be disc based. I mean, disc CD-ROM are like obviously the future here. And when they decide they're going to stick to cartridge based, it's like, well, we had all these great ideas for Final Fantasy VII, but Nintendo obviously doesn't want to, or more to say, Nintendo's going to limit our vision, what we want to do with the franchise. So we're going to take a risky, bold move and go to a console that we're not sure is going to be successful or not, but that's the only way we get our vision out there. And good thing is it worked out for them spectacularly because PlayStation is one of the big powerhouses now.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting too, because I don't think this was a motivation originally to switch to the PlayStation, but it was a benefit that was recognized later. I saw in an interview with Sakaguchi was that the PlayStation, Sony was not as restrictive about mature content as Nintendo was at that point in time, right? So, and it was speculated that like, well, that's kind of why a lot of the content in Final Fantasy VII with the Honeybee Inn and like, just like all the blood and like there's just like a lot of dark stuff that may not have been able to be as explicitly obvious if it came out on a Nintendo console. So the fact that like that game in its original form is coming to a Nintendo console now, it kind of shows how much Nintendo has come in that regards as well,
Oh yeah, I'm sure Nintendo's really opened up. Back then, they were just like really control free because the whole ESRB thing. But Sony was essentially like, okay, if you follow the rules and guidelines of the ESRB, then make and put what you want on here. Yeah. And that's something. You're right. That is something else that brought developers in. It's like you didn't have a lot of Nintendo strict checks because Nintendo at the time was like, well, we just dominated Sega. There's nothing really that can stop us now. And then Sony comes in. But Nintendo over the years, I guess, just lightened up and just got with the times on at least that.
Yeah.
I can't say much for other things because, I mean, as great as Nintendo is at making games and makes like several of my favorite series, no doubt, they really are not. They make really crappy business decisions that feel like they're at the expense of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it seems to me like they're able to make really good like macro, like big vision decisions. So For example, seeing the idea of the Nintendo Switch, realizing they need to reinvent the wheel, they need to kind of compete in a different marketplace. They're not probably going to be able to compete with Microsoft. Well, they're killing Microsoft everywhere else except the United States. But just being able to compete in that console market where it's just like top of the line, performance here. The fact that they're able to see that they've always done well with the mobile side of things. So like on the macro side, they're able to really like sense what would work. But I agree with you when it comes down to like implementing like different programs. We had the Nintendo Online deal recently. Some people are mad about that. I mean, they like their policies towards like YouTubers. A lot of times they get a little restrictive with what you can show when people are just trying to talk about their excitement for your game. I mean, they're really behind the times when it comes to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was making a joke about it about Nintendo and America Online. They're proud to join together to give you the best internet that 1996 can offer.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it just feels so weird that they don't really have, or maybe they do and they're just not really good at it, but like a team that's like dedicated to giving them the like most top-notch online structure they can for the device. And it just feels like most companies, when they're online access, it's like easy as 1 2 3, and Nintendo has to be like 1 2 baked potato 16, mashed potatoes 5. With their
Well,
online structure, it's like it's just like they make you go like extra steps that we've already figured out how to get past, like
yeah,
years ago, like decades ago. Feeling.
yeah. Well, I mean, in particular with like forcing people to use this like voice chat app and um, just everything surrounding that. Uh, it is really strange. What I find most baffling too is like I have a Nintendo Switch, which feels like a cutting edge piece of technology, but I can't watch YouTube on it.
I don't really care about that. I mean,
Well,
I
I
have
or like Netflix. I know, but like it's not that big of a deal. But like at the same time, it's like I feel like that should be on there.
it's
you know?
maybe, but it's a gaming console before anything. I'm looking at so many devices around me right now that can play YouTube and like other apps, like my phone here. I have iPad, uh, the PS4 and everything like that.
I don't
It's
know.
like it's nice if you put it on there, but I don't feel like it's really a high priority.
I feel like it would be cool if people could listen to podcasts or whatever the case. Maybe watch YouTube videos in the corner of the screen while they play the game. I just think like there's really cool things and neat things they could do on the Switch that they haven't. But from a design philosophy, they're really on top of things. So I don't know. I mean, they're making great games and they're attracting a lot of great games to the system. Obviously, that's shown clear here that they're able to convince Square to release some of their biggest games on the Switch for the first time on a Nintendo console for the first time.
I don't know
That's
if
a
they needed convincing.
you think Nintendo, you think Square was like beating down Nintendo's door to release these games on like the GameCube and the Wii?
Oh, I'm sure, because for as successful the Switch is, everyone is trying to get their games in there somehow.
Well, no, not the Switch. I mean, there are other systems. Because I think like I agree with you. I think like Square probably approached Nintendo about this, but I think that in of itself shows that like Nintendo's been doing really really well with attracting companies to the Switch. But I think that in the past, like I'm not sure, like I don't know. It seemed to me like you could never get these games on a Nintendo console. So
Well, with like Square Enix in particular, with the Final Fantasy series, they're always trying to push the limitations of what this generation can do with the Final Fantasy games. Because even for their times, Final Fantasy 10 looked amazing, 12 looked amazing, 13 looked amazing.
well, I'm
These kind
sure.
of games could not run on any Nintendo hardware. You can argue maybe the GameCube, but the GameCube had a weird hardware structure, especially with the small discs they used. I
Mhm.
think Final Fantasy X in particular, they probably would have had to separate
Well,
into 2 discs.
yeah. But I mean, I think the GameCube could have easily ran Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 9, right?
Right, but no generation console had those games. at the time.
Yeah, well, exactly. And then as we go forward, I think the Wii could have definitely ran Final Fantasy X. I no doubt in my mind about that, and all those other games as we kept going forward. I mean, it's just I don't know. To me, it's interesting that it's finally coming out on a
I think
Nintendo
it's
console.
mostly that way just because how the hardware is built. That's not that easy to port it over. The versions of the Final Fantasy that we're getting on the Switch are all ports from the PC version.
Hmm.
Like this isn't like the PS1 port. Like this is like the IDO's FF7 uh, PC version that we're getting on the Switch. Like same with 9, the 10 and 10.2 remasters. And the reason why they're able to convert so easily is because, well, first off, they're from the PC, and the Switch is more open ended for that type of thing. Devices before on the Nintendo devices before couldn't like properly translate that over without having to do a lot of work. I'm very sure this is actually pretty. I mean, you definitely got to put some effort to make sure it ports over and you can play it dock or undocked. But that's pretty
Sure.
much the extent of what you need to do to get that working on that device. Like
Yeah.
you don't
I
have to
mean,
change like mess with like the processing unit or anything like that.
yeah, I think you're probably right in that. Like, the fact that it's so easy to do probably gives a lot of reason why this is coming to the Switch now. I guess I just look at it like, well, I'm sure they had contracts with Sony, and Sony was giving them just an exceptional deal based on like how much money they get back per unit sold if you stay exclusive with Sony for your mainline series. Obviously, they haven't been exclusive with Final Fantasy 13. That came out on the Xbox. 15 came out on the Xbox. Um, but I mean, man, I think Nintendo consoles, like, they could have ran a lot of these games for like 10 or 15 years now. And it's probably a lot of it is, like you said, a kind of a hardware issue uh, or some other obstacle in that case. But regardless, I'm really, really happy these games are coming out on the system. I plan on buying all of them. I don't know about the Pocket Edition. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to spend $30 or whatever it's going to be on the Pocket Edition when I already own the real version. And I think you can get the real version for cheaper
Like
now.
I
So
said before, if you didn't like the story of 15, you're not going to like it in its pocket form.
yeah, and it's not really. I can't put the Switch in my pocket, so I don't know. Um,
The gameplay is okay, but
yeah,
and I already saw how. I mean, I saw the preview, and it works exactly like I said. It would you just do button commands instead of like swiping commands or anything like that.
yeah. See, what I'm really surprised about, aside from that, is just the fact that like all these games were like confirmed like at the same time. I'm surprised they didn't like just drip it like, okay, well here's Final Fantasy 9. Okay, well here's Final Fantasy 10 like a month later. Okay, here's Final Fantasy 12, which really surprised me. And then, when we get close to the Final Fantasy 7 remake time, just dropping Final Fantasy 7 on the play on the Switch. I'm surprised like they just confirmed it all right now. But anyways,
You want to talk about the elephant in the room?
what, Final Fantasy 8?
Yeah, no FF8.
That is honestly baffling that they would choose Crystal Chronicles, but they would not choose Final Fantasy 8.
Well, you saw the article I sent you. There's a specific reason. It's a theory still, but
Yeah.
it's definitely the most accurate one I've heard about
Yeah, I can pull it
FF8.
up on the screen. Are you talking about from the owner of the RPG site?
Yes, he made a series of tweets to
Let me see if I can
explain
get this up.
why FF8 is likely not been HD remastered yet, and to
Oh,
put
you
in
want me to
short,
just read his tweets?
it's a little long. I can probably just sum it up.
Okay.
It's basically every project with many companies, not just Square, back like in the 90s and arguably a little bit early 2000s, they really didn't keep their data of their games, or their coding or anything like that. It usually got tossed aside to make room for their next game. And the reason why we have an FF7 port is because Eidos made from the ground up, made a PC port over of FF7. They took the assets from the PS1 version, and they basically had to recreate and get it to so it'd be as work with the PC as much as possible. But this is something they didn't do for Final Fantasy VIII.
Right.
The PC port you see on there is just pretty much like as much of a conversion as possible, and uh, even then, the FF8 PC version is just ridiculed with problems that people on like third party people.
You're talking about the original.
Yeah, the original PC version of FF8.
Right. Not the current one.
Well, current one too. I mean,
Really?
people had to take that because that's what they sold you on Steam is that original FF8 PC.
No,
port.
I must have bought because I own it on Steam, but I think I got it like 2 years after it came out, so they must have patched the crap out of it.
Well, people on the internet patched the crap on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But essentially, the FF8 assets are gone, and they did keep some for 9. But like as you can see, like with like the textured backgrounds, like they had to convert that over from the PS1 version. They didn't, because if they kept those assets for like the backgrounds or FF9, it actually would have been easy enough to like upscale them to HD. But no, that's what they. So it kind of makes me think they did more of a lazy job porting it over.
Yeah.
But,
well, here's the only thing I would kind of like. My only thing I could see with that, and I think that probably is true that like it's just easier just to do that. But if you think about it, like, man, they just made Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition from scratch, right? They pumped that thing out in like a year. That probably took I don't know how many resources to complete. I know obviously that's not going to be probably the same extent of taking Final Fantasy 9, for example, but I mean I think that like I don't know. To me, it just seems like like if they wanted to, there would be other options. But obviously, they're going to go with the cheapest option. I think what you're describing would be the easiest option, right? To just take the PC port and just kind of use that. So I don't know.
Yeah. There's also the debate of if FF8 is even worth remastering or remaking, because as he pointed out also that FF8 is essentially the middle child of the PlayStation era. Like FF7 was like the most like
But here's the thing. Like I see what you're saying, and I think I agree with you too that like critically 8 is not held up in as high as regard as some of the other ones. Sometimes it depends on who you ask. Some people they love it, right? But I mean as far as like sales wise, and it's probably because it was feeding off Final Fantasy VII, but I mean it's like the third or fourth highest selling game, you know.
Well, yeah, but FF8 is still the middle child, as in then it didn't have the impact that FF7 did, and didn't have the critical acclaim that FF9 did. So it's kind of right there in the middle. Like it's a good game. FF8 is good, even though it has a terribly flawed junction system, awful tutorial, can easily exploit the game, and enemies leveling with you are just not a good idea. But I mean, it excels in other areas. Like I think it has a great world, and I think the story itself is pretty good. So things like that really hold up for it, and like the battles themselves are pretty okay. But I think if they really did want to put effort in putting an HD remaster of 8, they would really need to take time to fix each and every one of those flaws in some way or another. Because I think if you re-release that game and you didn't do much to change that type of fix those type of problems, I think 8 would be held to a lot more criticism today than it did back then. And FF7 and 9, even though may have some outdated features to it, they still hold up incredibly well today. Like there isn't like isn't anything particular you can do to really break the game, unless like you are just some crazy whiz kid of that game and you've just studied it inside and out. But like on a normal playthrough of FF8, it's like you start noticing all these faults. It's really hard to understand the junction system. It's hard to like it's really tedious to draw all this magic to yourself. Like it's like things like this that a modern gamer would probably not be up for doing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but On the other hand, I mean, look, they're putting 10-2 on the Switch. They're putting Crystal Chronicles on the Switch. I'm not saying 10-2 or Crystal Chronicles are more complicated from a mechanical standpoint, but I mean, as far as being like jarring to the audience members, I mean, hey, like especially 10-2 is going to be pretty jarring to someone who's just getting into Final Fantasy that may not have grown up with Final Fantasy 10, etc. They might be excited about that game and then have the same reaction like we did when we first got it.
Well, 10-2 holds up mechanically, but I mean, its story isn't great, but it does hold up mechanically. Like that game has an amazing battle system. I'll praise that all day.
Yeah, mechanically it's fantastic, but I mean, as far as everything else, it's a little bit. It takes a little bit for you to get used to. So honestly, I think if they put 8 on there, they would make money. They would probably make more money than sales for Crystal Chronicles or 10-2, unless 10-2 is being combined with 10 again. I mean, look, I just think 8 is a missed opportunity, and I don't see any reason for them not to do it. I think they would make their money back, and I'm sure there's lots of people that would still enjoy Final Fantasy 8 today.
Oh, I want to see 8 put on there for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just saying where the trial and tribulations are likely of trying to get 8 on there. Because and for Crystal Chronicles, I would argue that I did have fun with that game back then. I thought it was pretty good for a time, especially when they're putting online co-op in it. I think the one thing I really hated in that game was carrying the chalice around. Like one person in your team has to be carrying the chalice at all times. And it was kind of their dumb way of making it so everyone stays at the same screen and not running off by themselves on a thing. But the thing that kind of disappoints me with this port of Crystal Chronicles is that if everyone's on their own Switch now, or that you should have the option to like be able to run off on your own somewhere on the map. But I can kind of understand if they're offering single player for that.
Yeah.
But or like local multiplayer. But I think that's something they could have dropped, because that's like the one thing I think that was really holding that game back was like one of your 4 party members has to be holding it at all times, which limits one character while the others have fun.
Yeah, that sounds really cumbersome, and I'm not too sure about that. I mean, I'll dive into it. I've never played the game. Really, I've seen other people play it, but I don't know. It always seemed like well, I mean, it is an offshoot of the Final Fantasy series. I am surprised that Square announced so many Final Fantasy games, or Nintendo did as well, yet we still don't have a Chrono Trigger release for the Switch, which has always been on Nintendo consoles. And it's a Square Enix product. I mean, it seems strange to me,
I might have a theory it's because they've had to update and patch Chrono Trigger so much that I delayed the Switch version until they can make until they get all the patch data together with it and then release it.
See, I kind of jokingly, I don't tweet that often, but when I saw these announcements, I went on our Twitter and I said something along the lines of, Square Enix announces 8 Final Fantasy games in one day, yet we still haven't seen a release for Chrono Trigger. Who knew those patches were so resource intensive? But and I was kind of joking, like, hey, the Chrono Trigger version on Steam was so jacked up that it possibly push back a release date or an announcement for Chrono Trigger. But I have to think that an announcement for Chrono Trigger is coming. I couldn't imagine them not releasing Chrono Trigger on Steam. That would be absolutely, or excuse me, not Steam, the Switch. That would be absolutely absurd. So, yeah.
You know what I'm upset they didn't announce?
What's that?
The Seiken. It's already out in Japan. Mm-hmm. It's like Seiken Densetsu 1, 2, and 3 in one game. And it's and they HD upscaled them, not like HD, but upscaled the games themselves, and they look beautiful on the Switch. I was like, I really want this. This looks a lot better than the Secret of Mana 3D remake we got.
The crappy version. Yeah.
So I wanted to see that, but they haven't announced that yet. I'm like, that's something that would sell really well here.
Some of this stuff might be coming though, because you go back to the fact that they like so many Final Fantasy announcements were made in the same time, that tells me they got more in the canon. You know, I like because if that's all you had, you would just drop that every time. You would just drop a little bit, be like, oh yeah, we're releasing this game, and then later like, oh yeah, we're releasing this game to try to make it seem like this bigger thing than it is. So the fact that like it was all announced at the same time, I think that a lot of the games that we're expecting are going to come to the Switch, especially with the fact that like the Switch has been like announcing very obscure games. We talked about Langrisser, which was a game which we only got the first one in the United States, but like all the sequels pretty much came out in Japan only, except I think like one of them. A very obscure title, not a lot of people in the West know about. It's being remade for the Switch, right? Like there's so many odd games like that that are coming to the Switch. I'm sure like a lot of these games are going to be coming down the road.
I do hope you're right, because I really do want to see those type of games on the Switch. Right now, the Switch has been just like a powerhouse for indie games or ports or whatnot. And like, of course, you got your wonderful Nintendo games coming out every 90 days or so.
Yeah.
And you know, Switch has just been so top notch. I just want to see it get more and more successful, and I just want to see like every Final Fantasy game. Like I would like to see the PSP remasters of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on there.
Yep.
I guess the 3D. I guess since it's the only one available, the 3D remake of FF3, FF4. I would honestly want the
I want both
PSP
versions.
version more. But I'm very sure they will just put the 3D version on there because there's a PC version of it already. They can just port that over.
It's a really good
5
version.
and
though.
6, they don't need to really focus on that one because I know which ones they'll bring over.
You know, I don't know. Yeah, that's true. It's Square. It's Square. They'll just be like, well, let's just try putting these crappy versions on Switch and seeing what happens. Oh, that was a terrible idea. All right.
Like, I just know that's what they would do. They wouldn't take time to actually properly remaster 5 and 6 and put on there.
Yeah. So, anyways, and last little comment on here. I'm super stoked that Final Fantasy 12 is going to be on a mobile platform. That's awesome. I think we speculated that they could do that in the past, but I'm really surprised that was actually confirmed. So I'm really excited to play that game on the Switch as well. My only reservation is I wish it was, it also included the original battle system as well, not just the Zodiac system. But I can gripe about that for the next 20 years.
Yeah, that definitely was a pleasant surprise for sure. I'm glad Final Fantasy 12 was making its way to the Switch also. I wasn't surprised though to see World of Final Fantasy because that seems like
I forgot to bring that up. Yeah,
that's a game that's pretty appropriate for the Switch.
Yeah, that wasn't surprising at all. But I still haven't bought that game or played that game. I've been wanting to, so I think the Switch version might be right down my alley.
It's pretty okay. It has a weird structured battle system, like with like the monster stacking and everything. But if you're someone who is nostalgic for previous Final Fantasy games, I think there is some to enjoy in World of Final Fantasy. It's a pretty decent game, but you have to be like a Final Fantasy fan to enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I am a Final Fantasy fan, so I think I would enjoy it. I've just not. Every time I see a price for it, it's always been like $40, $50. So I'm not sure if I would enjoy it at that price.
And I will say it has a pretty amazing soundtrack. Like it has pretty good remixes of previous Final Fantasy themes, and its own original themes are pretty good. Like it's very relaxing.
Very cool. I'll have to check it out. So I think a lot of these games were confirmed for 2019.
Yeah, I think they'll be spread over the course of 2019. I don't think they'll release it all at once.
Yeah, I think there's one of the games, I can't remember. It wasn't any of the big, it wasn't 7, 9, 10, or 12. One of them is going to be coming possibly in 2018, but I think it was either the Pocket Edition or I think it was the Pocket Edition. I don't know. We'll have to see.
In the Pocket Edition, did they say?
Oh yeah, it is. Wait, the Pocket Edition's already out. Okay, there was one. Let me look this up.
I can look right now. Let's see what.
Well, I know the Pocket Edition is currently out right now, but I'm trying to think. I felt like they said one of the FF games was coming out in 2018.
Let's see. Yeah, here it is, and it's actually on sale for $18 instead of 30.
Oh, nice.
They put Bastion on here also. I downloaded Hyperlight Drifter recently, so I want to try that.
Awesome. Yeah, I plan on getting that too. I do see. Okay, so yeah, they also had okay, World of Final Fantasy is November 6th, so that's coming up real quick. And then we also have Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, which is coming out possibly in the winter of 2018. And then Final Fantasy 12, 7, 9, 10, 10, 2 is all going to be in 2019. So we got World of Final Fantasy and Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, which I don't care about. It's coming out this year. So
if you're a dungeon crawler fan, they're pretty fun. Yep. I'm not a big dungeon crawler person though, so it doesn't appeal to me. But anyone who likes that type of game, Chocobo Mystery Dungeon has stuff to offer.
Yep. I like that type of stuff when it's like $5. But anyways, so that's about what we can talk about right now. Very, very exciting that all these games were announced. I think I'm going to buy all of them, to be honest. Besides the Chocobo Dungeon and let's see, the Chocobo Dungeon and Crystal Chronicles, I might not buy, but everything else I plan on buying. So this is very, very exciting. I hope we get physical editions of these games. It's probably just going to be digital versions, but it would be really cool if they would release Final Fantasy VII, like a physical edition that you could buy for the Switch. I would be all over that.
I'll play Final Fantasy IX on a wet paper napkin. Of course, I'm going to get it on the Switch.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, so that about wraps that topic up. Next, we have a variety of different trailers we're going to kind of run through. Let me get the timestamp on here so I'm not... All right, cool. So we have 4 games here. We have Kingdom Hearts 3, which got a trailer. We have Square Enix's Project Prelude Rune. And then we have Project Awakening. And then we can also talk about Tales of Vesperia's Definitive Edition. So first off, let me get the screen up here. And while we're talking, I'll kind of play the trailer. Let's see here.
I didn't get much from that Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer. It showed like a couple more things we know. They did show a little bit more of the Big Hero 6 world. Because the only thing we had was like a concept art of it for a long time. They finally just actually showed some gameplay in there of like the San Fran, Tokyo, I forgot what it's called in that movie. But apparently your assistant, or at least you start off with, was the big guy. God, I forgot his name. I should watch that movie again. It's pretty good, but I've forgotten a lot about it.
Yeah, so I haven't watched this movie, so to me, I'm just like, okay, this looks okay. But I mean, the trailer, it seems kind of like every other Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer we've seen. It even uses that same song in the background. I don't know the artist that sings it, but anyways, like a lot of the same stuff we've already seen. Obviously, I mean, it's new areas, so that's kind of exciting. And I mean, there was a lot of criticism with the other trailers that like there was no sound effects. It was just like a song with like some dialogue. And that's still the same here. We do see some of the gummy ship stuff, which is kind of cool. But
yeah, that is one thing we did get to see. That looks pretty cool. It looks more, I think they're sticking with like the Kingdom Hearts 2 type of deal and just making it feel like more Star Fox feeling.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I'm excited for this game. It looks really, really good. They keep showing us more and more stuff with this game, but at this point, like I'm just ready for it to come out. So I'm excited for it to come in January. But
I agree with you. I think they've shown everything they can really show without spoiling too much, because they've already thrown a couple spoilers in there, and I don't want to say them on here for people who haven't watched the trailers, but there's like just one thing I'm like, why'd you have to reveal that in the freaking trailer? Why did you release that in the third game and let it be more impactful when it happens? I hate when trailers do that sometimes.
Yeah, they kind of release too much. There's one Final Fantasy X trailer for I think it was the remastered version for the PlayStation 3. Like if you watch that game or watch that trailer, it's like 2 minutes long, and it like tells you like the entire plot line, like all the way to the very end. It tells you who Sin is. It like tells you like the last like hour of the game, and it's a very dramatic trailer if you know the plot line of the game. But I'm just like, dude, this is a terrible trailer. So yeah, sometimes the especially Square, they go a little far with their trailers. Or in Final Fantasy 15's case, with the Omen trailer, they released a 5 minute long trailer that has nothing to do with the game. So they're all over the place.
And it feels unnecessary too, because all you have to really do is be like, Kingdom Hearts 3 is coming, come buy it, and every Kingdom Hearts fan will come rushing in. So you didn't really need to reveal those spoilers. You just need to reveal enough to get like a new audience in. Like,
Yeah,
you're already doing that, showing off Disney Worlds. That's fine. Like, show off Frozen, show off Big Hero 6, and Pirates of the Caribbean. That's cool, but you don't reveal such like such important detail moments in your trailer. I mean, you don't need to win over Kingdom Hearts fans. You already won them over.
Yeah, it's like they can't really find a good ground. I mean, the other Nomura game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, all we see from that game are just like it's exact polar opposite. We'll see like a screenshot or something, and like that's it. But then on Kingdom Hearts 3, it's like the exact opposite, and that's probably because the game's coming out sooner. So, but anyways, yeah, it's.
I mean, game looks great. Just the trailers are just something left to be desired sometimes.
Yep. Let's go to the next game here. Window up. All right, so we have Project Prelude Rune. So this is the game that kind of pulled the former Tales producer. I think I said director before, but whatever.
Hideo Baba.
Yeah, that guy. Hideo Baba. His name still makes me laugh. But anyways, so he's the producer for this game. He formerly was a producer for the Tales games. And Square Enix kind of brought him over and has him creating his own game here. It's got a trailer. I really dig the aesthetic of this game. I like the art style. I think you had some not criticisms, but one observation you saw, right?
Yeah, I mean, aesthetically, it looks good. Like, it has that nice cell shading kind of look to it that I like.
Love it.
But that animation of him running up the hill, like the character specifically, looked so stiff, like ridiculously stiff.
Yeah, it's kind of almost, I don't want to say PS2 animation, but it's
like he was trying to run up a hill in tight hipster pants.
Well, yeah. Well, his pants are pretty tight, but yeah, it shouldn't look like that. Yeah. But I mean, like, this is the first time we've seen this. I mean, it's probably really early. It's kind of perplexing that they didn't polish it a little bit more. But I mean, as far as like showing off the world in this trailer, it looks really, really good. This looks like it could be a good game, aside from the issue that you brought up.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes up. That's just the one thing I noticed when I was like, oh man, the world looks great, and I like the graphical style they're using it. And what is he doing?
Yeah. So I mean, it was previously announced in 2017, and they've kind of been a little like secretive about this game. We haven't really seen much aside from, I think, like a kind of like a concept image. So I really, really think this is really, really cool. It's a big departure from the Tales series, I think, from what I've seen. Maybe not a big departure, that's not the right word, but it is definitely, it seems more to me like the world seems more Xenoblade-ish. I don't know, from the way I look at it. That's kind of the vibes I'm getting. So I'm definitely excited to hear more about this game. It says it's scheduled to launch with the PS4, but I guess, I don't know. At this point, any game that's announced for the PS4 that's this early in development, I'm very, very skeptical. But
if it does well enough, it'll likely make it to PC.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as coming out on the PS4 as opposed to just waiting to the PS5, but I mean, this game doesn't seem like it's going to take 15 years to make. So, and it's using Unreal Engine, so I guess it's totally within reason that it'll get there. It could possibly come on the Switch too, huh?
It could, if the hardware meets the requirements.
Yeah, this game looks good. I'm excited. The other game we had that you kind of sent me a link to that I haven't really been following, but Project Awakening. Um, this is supposed to be a JRPG,
You sure
and
about that?
well, okay. So from DualShockers, the article, the title says a mysterious JRPG, Project Awakening, finally gets new trailer. Looks fantastic, and it keeps referring to it as a JRPG. Now, when you watch the trailer, it looks amazing. I'm gonna buy this game, but it does not look very JRPG ish
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
definitely got some Western influence. It looked like it looked like kind of like a mix of Dark Souls and Monster Hunter.
Yeah, well, yeah, or like I don't know, like kind of like an Elder Scrolls vibe I was getting too. But yeah, I see what you're saying too, as far as like the design of it. Graphically, like man, this is like top notch. Like this, some of these scenes look just gorgeous. Obviously, this is just probably I'm just probably looking at like FMV sequences here and looking like an idiot. But I mean, it looks really, really good. And it's basically it has this guy. We don't know who he is, but he's very European looking, and he comes out and he's like fighting this. Looks like I was gonna say a dragon, but it's actually just like a giant lizard deal. And I mean, it's obviously action oriented, but it looks really, really exciting to play. Um,
Yeah, this game looks like my type of game, most definitely. That's
yeah,
why I was excited when I played it, and didn't look like some like teenage JRPG character either.
yeah. It's just funny that like this article keeps referring to this as a JRPG. I'm waiting for the 4-year-old character to appear or the other cast of characters like that are like 15 and like or, or something else, or like somebody in like a wedding dress that also like fights with a sword. Like this doesn't seem like a JRPG, but
Uh,
I'm
this
but
this is very much an action game. Maybe it'll have some role playing elements in it, but I think it'll mostly be an action game first, then a RPG second.
yeah. I mean I guess like the people working on it are Japanese, so maybe that's why they say it's a JRPG. But
Everything from Japan is a JRPG. Let's just say that.
yeah, even if stylistically it's not. Yeah, um,
Mario's a JRPG.
yeah, it's a JRPG,
Mm-hmm.
of course. Yeah. Anyways, so we're gonna follow this, and if we hear anything else, we will let you all know about that. But another announcement that was really kind of interesting. We have Tales of Vesperia. Um, Originally, I think there was said it was going to come out in like the December timeframe, probably, but it gets a January 2019 release date. Um, it's particularly January 11th. It's going to come to the Switch, PC, Xbox One, and the PS4. That's really close to Kingdom Hearts 3, but I'm still going to pick it up.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll eventually play it. It might not be highly prioritized since I've gone through it already, but this is the definitive version we never got from Japan, and they actually did alter the story to for some reasons. Like there's a certain character in the game that was never a party member, but they changed it in definitive version and altered the story some so that character joins your party.
So it's changed a little bit.
Yeah, it's I think it's changed enough that people who played it the first time can go through it the second time and get some like get something new out of it.
So if I play this new version, and then let's say I'm criticizing the story, or I'm saying or I'm the exact opposite. I'm saying I like it. Will I be able to experience the original story as well? You know?
I don't know if they'll offer original mode on there or not, but
Mm,
from what I heard, the story didn't change greatly from it.
okay,
It
so
just changed enough to get like the character you want in your group with you.
gotcha. Okay, because I'm just thinking of like the Zodiac Age deal where, some people didn't like the Zodiac Age system as much, and a lot of people were like, "Well, you got to play the original," and then people that didn't like the original, they're like, "Hey, you got to play the Zodiac Age." These games have to have both, but if it's not that big of a deal,
Tales of Vesperia is a very straightforward game. I don't think there's so much you could change to that battle system.
yeah. Um, but anyways, I'm gonna pick this game up for sure. I'm excited. So, um, January 11th. It's going to come out on all these systems, so it's going to be really, really exciting, I think.
It's my personal favorite Tales game. So, if you want to know what the Tales series was like at its prime, in my opinion, I would pick up Vesperia when it comes out.
Yep, for sure. So it's really, really exciting. What was our next topic here? All right, so we're going to go into some of the viewer questions, or viewer topic suggestions. Last week we we just basically asked at the beginning of the show, what do you guys want us to talk about? Can you suggest some topics? So we had 2 listeners suggest some very interesting topics. So let's go here. Let me share the screen here. And we have, first off, from Cerez Cypher. He says, possible idea for a discussion topic. What qualities define a game as being in the RPG genre? A long time ago, RPGgamer.com was one of my regular sources of information on RPGs. And I remember times when I'd look through their list of games and I would see something that would make me think, is this really an RPG? The foremost games for which I remember thinking that were the Legend of Zelda games. I looked through some of their lists of games today and I'm wondering, why don't they have something like Heavy Rain on there? This is a very interesting question. I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit in the past, but I'm willing to bring it back up because it is an interesting idea for a topic. But what, Eric, in your mind, what separates like maybe an action adventure game from an RPG genre game? I know.
I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
because the definition of it just keeps changing every year. Like what defines an RPG now? Oh, it needs like numbers and turn-based type systems. Oh, it needs like a cast of characters that you in a long story. Oh, or it needs or it needs like a heavy emphasis on player choice. It's like everyone has like their own definition of what makes an RPG an RPG. I mean, I feel like there's like an obvious distinction with some games. Like, first person shooter is obviously not an RPG.
right.
And, honestly, I don't consider The Legend of Zelda an RPG. I consider it an action adventure game. It may have some RPG elements sprinkled in it here and there in some places, but it's mostly if I was throwing it into a category, I would be throwing it into action adventure easily. But
sure.
But then you get one that can be like in a rocky area, like Kingdom Hearts. It's like it's an action game, but it has a lot of role playing elements to it, like equipping items and characters, a leveling system.
It has a lot of RPG characters in it from other series,
Yeah, and it has like stuff you manage on Donald and Goofy. It's and then you argue, it's like, is this a JRPG or is this an action adventure game? And it's kind of both in a way. So that just in short, I think it's really hard to define that, and everyone has their own interpretation of what a role-playing game means to them. It's so hard to argue.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we ultimately can't define the fine line of what defines it. Like, we can easily define what a first-person shooter is, and we can easily define what a sports game is.
Sure.
But we can't really define that.
And this is a question, honestly, that because we are primarily an RPG podcast here, that we've kind of struggled with ourselves, because we have to talk a lot of times about like, well, is this game really an RPG? Should we talk about it? Sometimes we're like, well, it has enough RPG elements for us to talk about it, right? Whereas, other games may not. I mean, games like the Zelda series, I think technically they're not an RPG, but I think they are a cousin of the RPG family, right? Like if you enjoy our like standard role-playing games, you'll probably like Zelda games. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's closer to an RPG than it would be, like you said, to a first-person shooter or something like that. But it is kind of weird because, I mean, like games like, let's say, Horizon Zero Dawn, I would say, to me, that's an RPG, even though you don't have numbers for your stats. I think it's just like images or green bars or something like that. Like to me, like it still has enough RPG elements. It's like it feels like an RPG to me more than an action game, even though it's, I guess technically it's very similar to like kind of like the theme of Zelda games is to explore and kind of like solve problems and stuff like that. It just feels like an RPG, right? I'm going out, I'm buying equipment, I'm upgrading equipment, I can craft stuff, like I'm boosting my stats, I'm learning new skills. Like it's very story focused. But I mean, I see a lot of people out there that make solid points that like that is not an RPG. It's an adventure game, action adventure game. So I don't know. I mean, I think that if you look at games like, God, I can't remember. I can't think this morning. What's the God? This is gonna drive me nuts. I own all of them. The games where it's all about you climbing and like searching. It's about finding treasure. Oh my God, I'm gonna.
You just listed so many game series.
Yeah, but what's the biggest one? It's not an RPG at all.
You climb and find treasure.
You're gonna laugh when we think of this. It's they recently just made one where it started an all girls cast, but it's primarily been I can see it in my head. Jesus Christ. Let me look at my game shelf.
Is there any more clues you can throw out?
All right, so Uncharted, right? Uncharted is clearly an action game. It's an action exploration type game. It is not an RPG.
Oh, Uncharted.
Right? It's definitely not. But when you compare that to Horizon Zero Dawn and you say, well, Horizon Zero Dawn isn't an RPG, it's an action adventure game, I'm like, those games are like, I feel like very different experience, right? I feel like, I feel like it's much more in the RPG area, but I agree with you. It's a very grayed out and it's very hard to tell sometimes, especially today. So I mean, I know back in the day, RPGs were strictly like they had to have like Dungeons and Dragons type like character builds with stats of your characters. Like you had strength and you have to have your intelligence. You have to have die rolls and like everything like that. But I don't know, man. It's hard to tell now.
The thing is, and these different non-RPG genres have been recently adding RPG elements because I feel like in some way, I know I'm going to be criticizing some games I love, but I feel like when you add role-playing elements, especially to something like a Metroidvania type game, I think that kind of cheapens out the difficulty curve. Or like it's like a lazy way to make progress on your character. I feel like sometimes, and Symphony and Night is one of my favorite games, or Castlevania for sure. But one of the heaviest flaws I believe it has is that you can grind your way to victory. Whereas a game like Metroid, you're only left to the devices that you have found via exploration. But even then, the bosses are still tailored and balanced to what you currently have in your arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes each fight feel more exhilarating and fun. Like if you get beaten by a boss and like I'll just say Symphony Night again, I can just go out and grind like crazy on some monsters till I'm leveled enough that I can take the hits and beat that boss. Like I'm not learning that boss's moves. I'm not learning how to counteract his attacks. I am just grinding and then just tanking the damage. I guess in a way you can argue that's player choice, but I don't think that goes for great game design. I don't think you really learn much from the fight, just grinding your way past it.
See, yeah, I agree with you, but at the same time, like even in like more traditional like JRPGs, like with Final Fantasy VIII, where they have scaling to kind of like stop you from being able to just grind your way through the story. Like it kind of bugs me when the fact that like it's like I like the fact that like I have the option of either using strategy or if I'm just too stupid to figure it out, like I can spend the next 10 hours, like investing in my character and like I'll get rewarded for that time investment. But I can see, it for people that really want to win by the grit of their teeth and just like, really figure like a strategy out to beat a boss. It can feel like it's cheapens the experience if you just spent an hour grinding and now like it doesn't really matter what you do, you're gonna win.
And I speak of that mostly of action games, like turn-based role-playing games or whatnot. I'm like, if that's the way you want to do it. I personally don't prefer grinding in that type of aspect either, but I understand the strategic value of that.
Yeah.
But like an action game, like the whole point of it is to learn enemy movements and learn how to counteract that, and that to a smaller extent in RPGs also. But I mean, just leveling systems have always been a thing in RPGs, so I mean, it's kind of hard to make. It's sometimes hard to make like a non-leveling based system in the RPG. So, I mean, I give the aspect a pass in that regard, but I speak mostly action games. Like you can learn how to beat the boss, or you can just grind yourself enough that the boss can keep hitting you and you just kill it. I mean, what sounds more fun?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really hard to really separate them. I mean, I'm trying to think of like things that like are distinct with like the two genres, right? And like it's hard for me to like find anything. Like my first go-to reaction was, well, RPGs will have NPCs or non-playable characters that you can talk to. Well, a lot of action adventure games have NPCs that you can talk to. Well, you have to have specific like numerical stats on your characters. Well, a lot of games that I would say are RPGs do not have numerical stats. They use like images or something else of that nature. Sometimes they don't even have a leveling system, but they're still clearly RPGs. I mean, a lot of RPGs aren't turn-based. I mean, I would say Morrowind is definitely an RPG, but it's not turn-based, so it's really hard. I think a lot of it is just like the emphasis of these elements that matters, right? Like you said, like they might have elements of it. A lot of games today are using like skill trees and such, or like a level up feature to like kind of like create that gaming loop that keeps you coming back. But it's not a main emphasis of the game. The reason that people sit down with these games is for you, like you said, the tester reaction to what the enemy is doing, and it's kind of like it's a different experience, I would say, than like what an RPG, like a standard stereotypical RPG would be,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it just pretty much comes back to my conclusion that like it's just way too hard to define at this point. Like we all have our own ideas of what defines an RPG, and at the end of the day, it really is just a silly title to put in front of something that just describe what it is on maybe on the back of a package. But I think I think at the end of the day, like what type of game it really is.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that is a good description of what we think an RPG is or is not. But that's the best we can come up with at this point. But if you all have some different ideas or some different thoughts on this, we're willing to revisit it. So just let us know in the comments, and we'll definitely address it next week. But next question is from BioPhoenix. He has been always commenting on all our videos. He was actually a guest on our episode, like I think 2 episodes ago. Always appreciate to hear what he has to say. But first off, I'll just read his comment about Dragon Quest XI. He says, man, Dragon Quest XI sounds great, and I'm glad you guys both enjoy it very much. And yes, I actually do remember the ads for Final Fantasy X-2 back then. I think we all know why that game sold a lot more than we expect was that sex sells, and he was kind of like joking about that. But anyways, his interesting, his topic, I think it's an interesting topic. He says, by the way, I have an interesting topic question for you guys. What non-RPG series would you like to see made into an RPG spinoff? It can play as either turn-based action, tactile, I think he's supposed to trying to say roguelike, etc. So this is kind of interesting because our first question was, well, what makes it an RPG? And we're kind of like, well, it's too hard to tell. But his point here is, what non-RPG series you want to make into an RPG
I
spinoff.
guess we can just like define it in the way that like how Super Mario was turned like an action platformer to Super Mario RPG.
Hmm.
So I mean that's like a two distinction type of deal.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about what a series that is not an RPG that you would like that
I
you
kind
think
of
would
had
be
to think
cool?
about it, and the stuff I thought about, I was like, oh wait, they already did an RPG of that. I mean, obviously they did one like a Mario, they did one of Sonic, and that type of deal. Now the one I say is if the series had its stuff put or like had itself put together properly, but I would actually be for a Star Fox RPG type of game.
That could be cool.
Yeah, because they had like Star Fox Adventures where you were like on Dinosaur Planet, you know, and um, I mean that was pretty cool to go through, and like that was like it just kind of showed that you can expand on the Star Fox universe, and I think it would be pretty cool if they did something of that similar account, but like RPG, like you have your four characters, or you're separated from your four characters, and over time, you get them all back, and and you're like in this like contained story, like on this planet maybe, or you travel between different planets, uh, and you're like either on foot, or you can do like a tactical like maybe like a tactical grid, not Star Fox Command like, but like maybe more like Final Fantasy Tactics like, with like the R Wings and Landmaster or something like that. That could be cool, but I would only want to see something like that release after they've gotten a solid formula down on the traditional series, because Star Fox has been it just can't, it has a hard time sticking to one thing. Like the games that come out of Star Fox 64, then Assault, and then Command, and then the Wii U one. And the Wii U was the closest to going back to the roots, and it had fun aspects for sure, but it had that really bad control scheme.
Mm.
So I think as soon as they can consistently bring out great games in that series, I would be for like a spin-off, like on a handheld maybe,
Yeah.
of like a Star Fox type RPG deal, like made by like some like credible company, maybe like Square or Capcom or any of those
Yeah.
type of
That's
companies.
actually a good choice I hadn't even thought of. So, um, I'd definitely be interested in that. It is a difficult question for me though, because I had kind of had the same problem as you. I was like, well, let me think about what would be cool, and then you look at it, and it's like, well, they already did it. I for a moment I thought like, oh, like it'd be cool if they took some of these Star Wars games and made an RPG out of it, and I was like, oh yeah, they already did that, Knights of the Old Republic. Um, but speaking off that, I am a big Star Trek fan, and there's a lot of Star Trek games out there. Some of them are better than others. I haven't played all of them, but if they actually made like an actual Star Trek RPG, maybe not in the style of Knights of the Old Republic, I was thinking more of, I mean, I think it'd be cool, an open galaxy type deal, where you could visit planets, jump down there, kind of visit towns, see what's going on, solve problems, and obviously you'd have to have this overarching theme, maybe like the Borg are attacking, and you have to find like an ancient species or something like that. I don't know, but just the fact that you'd be able to explore and like level up and um, craft stuff, and like I have an engaging plot line. I think that would be really really cool. I think that would work really really well.
So you're thinking of something like Skyrim meets No Man's Sky.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking No Man's Sky, but like not No Man's Sky, like actually good. It would have to be more structured, I think, than No Man's Sky, because I think No Man's Sky's problem is that it's too expansive, and they tried to put too much just auto generation to make it as large as possible. The problem is you get bored, right? So they'd have to kind of structure it to a point where, like, well, no, you can't go to any planet in the in the galaxy. Yeah, you can only go to these planets. But yeah, something like Skyrim meets No Man's Sky. I think that would be freaking awesome.
I think that would have potential. I've seen some like Star Trek games made, but I've never really seen one that I felt like had that like triple A quality to it.
Yeah, usually they seem like cash grabs, to be honest. I know there's a Star Trek online game. A lot of people play that. I know it's supposed to be pretty good, but I've never tried it. But I have the same problem with you. I go to look at them and I'm like, this looks like it's like a 7 out of 10. This doesn't look like it's very good.
They feel very much like niche titles. It doesn't feel like they're going for like a mass appeal audience or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything else I could come up with. You got anything else?
No, that's really the best I can think of. It's
a really good question. I'm pretty sure, like, after we end this podcast, like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have like all these, like, all these things are gonna come to me. I mean, did they ever make like a Donkey Kong RPG? I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with that series.
Not that I'm aware of.
That might be kind of cool. I don't know. I think that would be something that would be better fit in like the Super Nintendo era than like a current, but I could be wrong.
I was thinking maybe Metroid also, but I mean,
did they ever make like a traditional like Castlevania RPG, like actual like not like a actual like JRPG Castlevania?
Not that I'm aware of.
That could be kind of cool.
You have your classic Belmont Castlevanias that are like action platformers, and you have your Metroidvanias that are your like with like your exploring type deal with RPG elements. Yeah, there's those, but I can't really think of much else. It might be some spin-off games in Japan, maybe. I'm not sure of.
Yeah. I mean, for all you naysayers out there about Horizon Zero Dawn not being an RPG, then I would like to see a Horizon Zero Dawn RPG. Tell me what would be different. And I'd like to see that. But yeah, I think that's about all I have, and it sounds like the same as well. I know we have a few more comments that we can kind of get to here real quick. Let's see here. So screen up. Appreciate the question, by the way, BioPhoenix. That was an awesome question. Edrices Pieces, I don't know how to say that name, sorry. But he says, for Dragon Quest XI, I just have a rule where I fight 2 of each type of new enemy in each area. It's enough to get through the game without trouble, and at the same time, it's not too much fighting. I've actually been kind of trying to implement that policy on myself there, because I have a habit of just grinding. So I've been trying to like cap myself on grinding in Dragon Quest XI and just do 2, or I sometimes do like 3 of each enemy type, just to see if I can get through the game quicker that way, but also I think it'll make it a little more enjoyable as well.
I think that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, for sure. Then we have Zero EXP. Says the Japanese version of Dragon Quest XI doesn't have an orchestrated soundtrack either. It also didn't have one for Dragon Quest VIII. The 3DS version of Dragon Quest 7 and 8 have an orchestrated one over there, and MIDI soundtracks in the West, though. I thought the Dragon Quest Japanese version of DQ11 did have an orchestrated soundtrack.
Yeah, I thought the whole complaint about the soundtrack was the fact that we got that version over that. I mean, you can certainly show me to prove me wrong, but that's what I heard from all these articles. It's that like people are complaining that the like we didn't get like an orchestrated soundtrack, that like, because wouldn't people mostly complain if there was one to be taken away from us to begin with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. The only thing I thought is maybe like because of the licensing issue, where I guess apparently the composer likes everyone in the orchestra to get royalties. Maybe Square was like, okay, you can write the music, but we're going to use virtual instruments for the whole thing. Let me look up Dragon Quest XI Japanese gameplay and see if...
Didn't we bring up that there was a modding team trying to mod the orchestrated soundtrack into Dragon Quest XI PC version?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of like solutions here to this predicament we're in. Maybe what happened was maybe they released it with the version that we have, right? The synthesized version, so they don't have to pay all these royalties. And then maybe they did like a Dragon Quest XI concert in Japan and like sold the soundtrack that way. I don't know. Let me. I'm gonna have some Japanese gameplay here. I'm gonna see.
Or maybe they're complaining from like Dragon Quest VIII that the original 8 didn't have it in Japan, But when we got it here in the West, they updated it to an orchestrated soundtrack.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm listening to it right now, and it sounds. This is the. Yeah, this sounds synthesized. Yeah, it is. Now this is. I don't know how old this Japanese version might be. August 10th, 2017. So that is the actual version. Huh. That's interesting. Maybe I don't know. We'll have to research that some more. Like maybe select tracks. Maybe he is right. We're not saying you're wrong. You might be wrong, but it doesn't sound like you are wrong. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have to look into it myself and see what's up.
Then we have a final comment from EAKAK. I don't know how you say that, but there you go. He said, I literally played 40 plus hours with the music turned off because I just couldn't feel for the serious, sad events when lame/happy tone is playing in the background. And to be honest, it's 10 out of 10 without any music attached to it, which is great. Eric,
the music is the part of charm of it.
Yeah, I've seen this a lot. Not a lot. I've seen this a little bit. Some people kind of criticizing the music. I think I saw Lore Runner. He, popular YouTuber, he had a similar complaint. He wasn't a big fan of the music. I think he actually put on like Morrowind music or something while playing. I don't know. Let me here. Let me say this before you get into it. I'll say this. Initially, I was not a big fan of. I was in the middle on the music. Like some of the tracks, I was like, this seems like this isn't very fitting. Like I'm supposed to be like this just doesn't. This feels way too uppity, and I'm just like woo, and like I'm like it feels weird. Like I'm not like all I am. I'm in a grass field. This doesn't feel like it fits. However, the longer I've played it, the more like it's kind of grown on me a little bit, and like I kind of gotten into like the swing of things. And some of the tracks are really really good, I find. And I'm even getting used to some of the more happier tracks, and I think it's probably something that, like, as a Dragon Quest fan, you kind of get used to. And once you get used to it, like it's like you just like it. It's not the typical tracks you would have maybe in what people are more familiar with, like in a like a Xenoblade game or like a Final Fantasy game. They tend to like try to like they're just composed differently. But go ahead.
Well, the one thing to take is that the Dragon Quest series has traditionally always been a lighthearted type of deal with the adventurous aspects. So a lot of times the soundtrack is most appropriate for like the given scene or whatnot. But Dragon Quest XI really feels like the first game where they've really taken like a more dark approach to it. There's a lot of more darker elements to the game than other games before it. But they still use the same type of style for it. The soundtrack, like the soundtrack hasn't like dramatically shifted from one another. Sugiyama is very traditional when it comes to that, and I feel like as someone who's played the rest of them before, I just kind of know how the soundtrack clicks or how it works for it. So I do understand to that extent. I can understand when it's like it feels more like sometimes like a cartoonish type of evil looming presence type of theme coming that maybe people who are on the more serious type of games may feel a little off put by that. But I think what mostly contributes to it is that this is a much darker game. And well, I think the soundtrack may just sound not as appropriate for it as it did before in previous games.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, to me personally, a lot of the tracks are really, really fitting. A lot of the town themes are excellent, I find. I really enjoy them. The only one that like has seemed really odd to me, and I've kind of gotten used to it, is especially I think it's in the beginning too, when you first venture out into like the path to like the next city, like that very just like it feels like marching band music, and it was it was a little strange to me at first. But once I kind of like listened to it a few times, I'm kind of like humming along with it, But at first I was just like, this is strange. Like, why am I listening to marching band music? But I got used to it, and I actually like it now. So by the way, if they come out with like if there is an orchestrated version of this soundtrack that I could like purchase, or like listen to it on YouTube, I would be all about that, because I'm interested to see what this soundtrack sounds like, with actual orchestrated parts. That would be very, very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but anyways, yeah, well, EAK, I'm glad you enjoyed the game regardless. He said 10 out of 10 without the music. So it seems like he really, really enjoyed the game regardless. So that's good. So, yeah. It looks like this game's doing well for getting people into the series. And that's always the goal here with these games. So, very cool.
Go buy it.
Yeah, if you haven't already. Anyways, so I think that about wraps up this episode. Eric, do you have any final thoughts with anything this episode?
Go buy Dragon Quest.
Eric wants you to buy Dragon Quest. I say buy it too as well. So anyways, thank you for listening. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate it. And also, we do have an audio version of this podcast. So in the description, you'll see a link to one of the places you can listen to the online version. I think there's actually 10 places you can listen to. In the right-hand corner of the YouTube page, there's a couple other places you can listen to on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. So that way you can listen to it on your phone in the car or while you're at work. With Spotify, you can be playing Dragon Quest XI while not listening to the music that you don't like, and you can be listening to our podcast instead, hearing Eric chastise you for not liking the music. So I'm just kidding about that, but you can listen to it while you're playing games. So there's a lot of different options to do. So make sure you subscribe there as well, and leave us your comments and let us know what you want us to talk about or what you disagree with or agree with, and we will cover it next week on our next episode. Anyways, thank you all for listening.
All right, take care.